The desert wind carried the scent of dust and danger as Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison crouched behind a crumbling mud wall in the Afghan village of Kalar. His weathered hands gripped his rifle as he surveyed the narrow alleyways that had become a maze of death. The mission was supposed to be simple. Intel had indicated that a high-value target, a Taliban commander named Hakim Zargar, was hiding in this remote village near the Pakistan border. What they found instead was a carefully planned trap that would test every skill they had learned in their years of service. Morrison's team consisted of 5 of the Navy's finest warriors. Petty Officer First Class Danny Chen was their communications specialist, a young man whose steady nerves under fire had saved them more times than anyone could count. Senior Chief Marcus Washington served as their demolitions expert, his massive frame concealing a gentle soul who could calculate explosive charges with mathematical precision. Petty Officer Second Class Alex Rodriguez was their medic, whose quick hands had pulled wounded soldiers back from death's door in dozens of firefights across 2 deployments. Finally, there was Petty Officer First Class Tommy Brennan, their youngest member at 24, whose keen eyes served as one of their designated marksmen. The team had inserted under cover of darkness 3 hours before dawn. Their helicopter had dropped them 2 miles outside the village, and they had moved through the rocky terrain with the silent efficiency that made SEALs legendary. Morrison had led similar operations dozens of times, but something felt different about this one. The intelligence seemed too clean, too convenient. In his 15 years of special operations, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming warnings. As they approached the village, Chen picked up unusual radio chatter on the Taliban frequencies. The communications were fragmented, but the patterns suggested coordinated movement. Washington noticed fresh tire tracks in the dirt that didn't match the typical vehicles used by villagers. Rodriguez observed that the usual sounds of early morning activity were absent. No roosters crowing, no children's voices, no mundane conversations that characterized rural Afghan life. The village felt like a stage set waiting for actors to take their positions. Morrison made the decision to proceed with extreme caution. They would enter the village in 2-man teams, maintaining overwatch positions and communication protocols. Chen and Washington would approach from the north, Rodriguez and Brennan from the south, while Morrison moved through the center to the target building. Each team carried enough ammunition for an extended firefight, medical supplies, and demolition charges. Their extraction point was a dry riverbed 1 kilometer east of the village, where their helicopter would pick them up at dawn. The target building was a 2-story mud brick structure that stood slightly apart from the other homes. Intelligence suggested that Zargar used the upper floor as his command center, while his bodyguards occupied the ground level. The building had only 2 entrances, a front door facing the village square and a rear entrance that opened into a small courtyard. Morrison's plan called for a simultaneous breach of both entrances, with covering fire from elevated positions. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern horizon, the teams moved into their assigned positions. Morrison watched through his night vision as Chen and Washington disappeared into the shadows on the north side of the village. Rodriguez and Brennan melted into the darkness to the south. Everything seemed to be proceeding according to plan when Morrison noticed the first sign of trouble. A dog began barking somewhere in the village, then another joined in. Within seconds, every dog in Kalar was creating a cacophony that shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Morrison knew that experienced fighters used animals as early warning systems. The Taliban had learned to position dogs strategically to alert them to approaching forces. What concerned him more was the systematic nature of the barking. It started from specific points and spread in a pattern that suggested human coordination rather than random animal behavior. Morrison activated his radio and spoke in barely audible whispers. The team acknowledged his signal, but before he could issue new orders, the first shots rang out from the north side of the village. Chen's voice crackled through the radio, reporting contact with enemy forces. Washington's deeper voice followed, requesting permission to use demolitions. Morrison realized that his team had walked into a carefully orchestrated ambush. The Taliban had turned the entire village into a killing field. Fighters emerged from hidden positions in rooftops, doorways, and alleyways. They had stockpiled weapons and ammunition in multiple locations, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape route. Morrison counted muzzle flashes from at least 20 different positions, suggesting a force 3 times larger than his team. Rodriguez and Brennan found themselves pinned down behind a low stone wall as automatic weapons fire chewed chunks from the ancient masonry above their heads. Rodriguez used his radio to report their situation, while Brennan identified sniper positions in the surrounding buildings. The medic's calm voice provided Morrison with tactical information, even as bullets whistled past his position. Washington's explosives training proved invaluable as he identified the strategic placement of enemy positions. The Taliban had positioned their heaviest weapons to block the most obvious escape routes while leaving only heavily defended paths open. It was a textbook ambush designed to funnel the Americans into predetermined kill zones where concentrated fire would eliminate them. Morrison found himself isolated in the village center as enemy fighters moved to surround his position. He took cover behind an abandoned cart and assessed his options. The target building that had drawn them to Kalar was now clearly revealed as bait in an elaborate trap. Intelligence had been compromised, either through infiltration or electronic surveillance. The Taliban had known exactly when and where the SEAL team would strike. Chen's technical expertise became crucial as he attempted to jam enemy communications while maintaining contact with their extraction helicopter. His equipment allowed him to monitor Taliban radio frequencies, giving the team advance warning of enemy movements. What he heard chilled him to the bone. The Taliban fighters were coordinating a systematic sweep designed to eliminate any possibility of escape. The intensity of the firefight increased as more enemy fighters joined the battle. Morrison could hear the distinctive crack of AK-47 rounds passing overhead, mixed with the deeper boom of RPG explosions. The Taliban had brought enough firepower to overwhelm a much larger force. Worse, they seemed to have unlimited ammunition and reinforcements moving in from surrounding areas. Brennan's marksmanship training proved essential as he engaged enemy snipers from his position behind the stone wall. His accurate shooting forced several Taliban fighters to abandon advantageous positions, buying precious time for his teammates. Rodriguez used these brief respites to treat a grazing wound on Brennan's arm, working with steady hands despite the chaos surrounding them. Washington's demolitions expertise allowed him to create temporary barriers using rubble and debris, channeling enemy movement and creating covered positions for the team. His knowledge of structural engineering helped him identify which buildings could be safely used for cover and which ones might collapse under sustained fire. As the battle raged through the early morning hours, Morrison realized that their situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Enemy reinforcements continued to arrive while his team's ammunition supplies dwindled. The Taliban fighters showed no inclination to withdraw, suggesting they had orders to eliminate the American forces at any cost. Morrison's radio crackled with updates from each team member. Chen reported that enemy communications indicated a blocking force positioned near their original extraction point. Rodriguez confirmed that Taliban fighters were moving through buildings to establish new firing positions. Washington identified at least 3 separate groups of enemies attempting to flank their positions. The SEAL team's training and experience kept them alive through the first hours of the ambush, but Morrison knew they needed a miracle to survive until their scheduled extraction time. The enemy had superior numbers, better knowledge of the terrain, and unlimited time to coordinate their attacks. Unless something changed dramatically, his team would not be leaving Kalar alive. As the sun climbed higher in the Afghan sky, casting long shadows between the village buildings, Morrison made preparations for a fighting withdrawal. His team would attempt to break contact and move toward an alternate extraction point 2 kilometers south of the village. It was a desperate plan that required precise timing and no small amount of luck. The Taliban fighters seemed to sense that their prey was preparing to move. Automatic weapons fire intensified from multiple directions, forcing each SEAL to remain in whatever cover he had found. Morrison watched through his scope as enemy fighters moved closer to his team's positions. Time was running out, and their options were disappearing with each passing minute. Just as Morrison began to think their situation was hopeless, something unexpected happened. A single rifle shot echoed across the village from an elevated position to the east. The shot was followed by complete silence as both sides tried to identify this new element in their deadly equation. The mysterious rifle shot that echoed across the Afghan village changed everything in an instant. Morrison and his team had been fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds when that single crack of a high-powered rifle brought an eerie silence to the battlefield. Taliban fighters who had been advancing confidently just moments before suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders, scanning rooftops and ridgelines for the source of the deadly accurate shot. From his position behind the abandoned cart, Morrison strained his eyes to identify where the shot had originated. His years of combat experience told him it came from high ground east of the village, probably from the rocky hills that overlooked Kalar. What puzzled him was the timing and precision. Whoever fired that shot had been watching the battle unfold and chosen the perfect moment to intervene. Chen's voice crackled through Morrison's earpiece with urgent information. The communications specialist had been monitoring Taliban radio frequencies throughout the firefight, and suddenly their chatter had taken on a distinctly different tone. Instead of confident coordination, the enemy fighters were expressing confusion and concern about an unknown sniper. Several Taliban commanders were demanding to know if their forces had positioned a marksman in the hills without proper coordination. The second shot came 30 seconds after the first, and this time Morrison saw its effect. A Taliban fighter who had been moving across a rooftop to flank Rodriguez and Brennan suddenly jerked backward and disappeared from view. The shot had been fired from at least 800 meters away, threading through narrow gaps between buildings to find its target. Only a shooter with exceptional skill could make such a shot under combat conditions. Washington reported movement in the enemy ranks as Taliban fighters began repositioning to deal with this new threat. Their carefully coordinated ambush was beginning to unravel as commanders tried to adapt to an unexpected variable. The demolitions expert could see fighters abandoning exposed positions and seeking cover from the elevated threat to the east. Rodriguez used the temporary confusion to improve his team's position, moving Brennan to better cover while keeping his rifle trained on known enemy locations. The medic's steady voice provided updates on their tactical situation as Taliban fighters struggled to maintain their overwhelming advantage. For the first time since the ambush began, Morrison felt a glimmer of hope that his team might survive this nightmare. The third shot eliminated a Taliban sniper who had been particularly troublesome for Chen and Washington. The enemy marksman had been firing from a minaret that provided excellent oversight of the village, but he made the fatal mistake of exposing himself while trying to locate the mysterious shooter in the hills. The bullet found him before he could fire another shot at the American forces below. Morrison activated his radio and attempted to contact whoever was providing covering fire from the eastern ridge. His calls went unanswered, but the shooting continued with methodical precision. Every 30 to 40 seconds, another carefully aimed shot would eliminate a key Taliban fighter or force a group of enemies to abandon an advantageous position. Chen's technical expertise allowed him to analyze the enemy communications more thoroughly. What he discovered both impressed and puzzled him. The Taliban commanders were dealing with a single shooter who seemed to anticipate their movements and target their most effective fighters. Several radio conversations suggested that the unknown marksman was eliminating squad leaders and weapons specialists with uncanny accuracy. The mysterious sniper's intervention had given Morrison's team breathing room, but their situation remained desperate. They were still outnumbered by at least 4 to 1, and their ammunition supplies continued to dwindle with each exchange of fire. Morrison knew they needed to capitalize on the confusion among enemy ranks before the Taliban could adapt to this new threat. Washington's demolitions training proved crucial as he identified structural weaknesses in the buildings surrounding their positions. Using carefully placed charges, he could create debris barriers that would channel enemy movement while providing covered routes for his team's withdrawal. The explosions would also serve as signals to coordinate their movement toward the extraction point. Brennan's marksmanship complemented the work of the unknown sniper as he engaged targets that were beyond the effective range of the Highland shooter. Working together without communication, the two marksmen created a devastating crossfire that forced Taliban fighters to remain in covered positions where they could not effectively coordinate their attacks. Rodriguez maintained his role as both medic and tactical observer, providing Morrison with real-time assessment of enemy movements while monitoring his teammates' condition. The firefight had been raging for over 3 hours, and fatigue was beginning to affect their reaction times and accuracy. He recommended that they attempt a breakout before exhaustion compromised their fighting effectiveness. Morrison made the decision to execute a fighting withdrawal toward the alternate extraction point. The plan required precise timing and coordination between all team members. They would move in bounds, with each pair providing covering fire while the others advanced towards safer positions. The unknown sniper's continued support would be essential for the plan's success. Chen's communication equipment allowed him to coordinate with their extraction helicopter, which was circling at a safe distance waiting for the team to reach the pickup zone. The pilot reported observing muzzle flashes from the eastern ridge, confirming that a single shooter was engaging Taliban forces from approximately 1,000 meters away. The helicopter crew offered to provide close air support, but Morrison declined due to the proximity of friendly forces. As Morrison's team began their withdrawal, the Taliban fighters attempted to pursue them through the village streets. However, the mysterious sniper seemed to anticipate every enemy movement, placing accurate fire on choke points and forcing the Taliban to seek alternative routes. This constant harassment disrupted their pursuit and bought precious time for the escaping SEALs. Washington's charges detonated according to plan, collapsing portions of 2 buildings and creating a barrier that forced pursuing Taliban fighters to take longer routes around the obstacles. The explosions also provided visual cover that concealed the American team's movement toward the edge of the village. The unknown marksman's shooting demonstrated not just exceptional accuracy, but also tactical intelligence. Rather than simply eliminating targets of opportunity, the sniper focused on Taliban fighters who posed the greatest threat to Morrison's escaping team. Machine gunners, RPG operators, and squad leaders received priority attention, systematically degrading the enemy's ability to mount an effective pursuit. Rodriguez and Brennan reached the village perimeter first, establishing overwatch positions that covered their teammates' withdrawal route. Brennan's scope allowed him to observe the eastern ridge, where their mysterious benefactor continued his deadly work. Through the morning haze, he could occasionally spot muzzle flashes from a concealed position among the rocks. Chen's electronic surveillance revealed growing frustration among Taliban commanders as they struggled to coordinate a response to the dual threat. Their radio discipline was breaking down as junior leaders demanded instructions for dealing with an enemy they could not locate or suppress. Several fighters had been sent to investigate the eastern ridge, but none had reported back. Morrison and his remaining teammates fought their way through the final section of the village under cover provided by both their advancing team members and the Highland sniper. Taliban resistance remained fierce, but their attacks lacked the coordination that had made the original ambush so deadly. Individual fighters and small groups continued to engage, but the systematic nature of the trap had been disrupted. As the team approached their new extraction point, Morrison finally got a clear view of the eastern ridge through his binoculars. What he saw surprised him. A lone figure in civilian clothes was positioned among the rocks with what appeared to be a hunting rifle. The distance made positive identification impossible, but the shooter's methodical approach suggested professional training rather than lucky amateur shooting. The helicopter appeared on schedule, approaching fast and low to minimize exposure time during pickup. Chen's coordination with the aircrew ensured that the landing zone was clear of enemy forces, though Taliban fighters continued to harass them from concealed positions in the village. The mysterious sniper maintained covering fire throughout the extraction process. As Morrison's team boarded the helicopter, he took one final look toward the eastern ridge. The unknown marksman had disappeared, leaving no trace of his presence except for the tactical impact of his intervention. Without his assistance, Morrison knew that none of them would have survived the carefully planned ambush in Kalar. During the flight back to base, Morrison's team tried to process what had happened in the village. Their mission to capture a high-value target had turned into a fight for survival against overwhelming odds. Only the intervention of an unknown shooter had prevented their complete annihilation. The identity and motivation of their mysterious benefactor would remain unknown, but his actions had saved 5 American lives. Chen's analysis of captured radio communications would later reveal that the Taliban had lost 11 fighters to the Highland sniper, including 3 squad leaders and 2 heavy weapons specialists. The precision shooting had effectively dismantled their command structure and disrupted their ability to coordinate the ambush. Intelligence analysts would spend weeks trying to identify the unknown marksman, but no conclusive evidence would ever surface. As the helicopter carried them toward safety, Morrison began planning his after-action report. The mission had been compromised from the beginning, suggesting security breaches that required immediate investigation. However, the professional intervention by an unknown friendly force raised questions that might never be answered. Someone had been watching their mission and possessed both the skill and equipment necessary to provide decisive support at the critical moment. 2 weeks after the harrowing events in Kalar Village, Master Chief Morrison sat in the intelligence briefing room at Bagram Air Base, staring at satellite photos and tactical analyses that raised more questions than they answered. The mysterious sniper who had saved his team remained unidentified despite extensive investigation by multiple intelligence agencies. What troubled Morrison more was the growing evidence that their mission had been compromised from the highest levels of Afghan intelligence. Colonel Sarah Martinez, the task force intelligence officer, spread aerial reconnaissance photos across the conference table. The images showed the eastern ridge where the unknown marksman had positioned himself during the firefight. Software. Detailed analysis revealed a single set of footprints leading to and from a carefully prepared shooting position. Spent brass casings found at the site came from a .300 Winchester Magnum rifle, a caliber favored by professional snipers worldwide. Chen had spent days analyzing the electronic intelligence gathered during the mission. His findings painted a disturbing picture of how thoroughly the Taliban had prepared for their ambush. Radio intercepts from before the mission showed coordination with sources inside the Afghan National Army Intelligence Service. The leak had provided the Taliban with detailed information about Morrison's team composition, insertion point, and primary target. Washington's analysis of the physical evidence from the village revealed the sophistication of the Taliban's preparation. They had pre-positioned weapons caches, established interlocking fields of fire, and prepared defensive positions weeks in advance. The level of planning suggested assistance from someone with formal military training, possibly a former Afghan army officer who had defected to the Taliban. Rodriguez's medical assessment of the team revealed the psychological impact of their near-death experience. Despite their professional training, each member struggled with the knowledge that they had walked into a carefully planned execution. Only the intervention of an unknown friendly force had prevented their complete annihilation. The medic recommended extended psychological evaluation for all team members. Brennan had become obsessed with identifying the mysterious sniper who had saved their lives. His analysis of the shooting demonstrated exceptional skill that surpassed most military marksmen. The shots had been fired at ranges exceeding 800 meters under combat stress, with a success rate that suggested either extensive experience or natural talent approaching genius level. Colonel Martinez revealed that similar incidents had been reported by other special operations teams operating along the Afghan-Pakistan border. In each case, American forces facing overwhelming odds had received timely assistance from an unknown sniper using hunting rifles and commercial ammunition. The shooter never attempted communication and disappeared immediately after each engagement. The investigation into the intelligence leak had uncovered a network of Taliban sympathizers within the Afghan security services. Several high-ranking officials had been providing operational details to enemy forces in exchange for substantial payments. The betrayal explained how the Taliban had acquired such detailed knowledge of American special operations procedures and timing. Morrison's after-action report emphasized the professional nature of the mysterious sniper's intervention. The shooting had demonstrated tactical awareness that suggested formal military training. The marksman had prioritized targets based on their threat level to the escaping American forces, rather than simply engaging targets of opportunity. Such discrimination required both skill and tactical knowledge. Chen's communication analysis revealed that Taliban radio traffic had included references to a ghost shooter who had been harassing their operations for several months. Multiple commanders had reported losing key personnel to long-range precision fire from an unidentified marksman who seemed to appear and disappear without warning. The consistency of these reports suggested a single individual operating independently. Intelligence analysts had developed 3 theories about the mysterious sniper's identity. The first suggested a former American Special Operations soldier who had remained in Afghanistan after his official deployment ended. The second proposed a foreign military advisor working without official sanction. The third, and most intriguing, indicated a local Afghan with exceptional natural shooting ability and access to quality equipment. Washington's investigation into the tactical aspects of their rescue revealed sophisticated knowledge of American military procedures. The mysterious sniper had understood how SEAL teams operated under pressure and had provided covering fire in exactly the right locations at precisely the right times. Such knowledge suggested either extensive observation of American forces or formal training in their tactics. The equipment analysis provided additional clues about their unknown benefactor. The 300 Winchester Magnum cartridge cases found at the shooting position showed consistent manufacturing marks indicating high-quality commercial ammunition. The rifle used was likely a precision hunting weapon rather than military issue, suggesting civilian procurement rather than government supply chains. Rodriguez had interviewed other special operations teams that reported similar assistance from an unknown marksman. The pattern was always the same. American forces facing overwhelming odds would suddenly receive precision fire support from an unidentified sniper who disappeared immediately after the engagement. No team had ever made visual contact with their mysterious benefactor. Brennan's ballistics analysis revealed impressive consistency in the unknown sniper's shooting. Every shot had been placed with surgical precision, eliminating threats without endangering nearby American forces. The level of accuracy suggested thousands of hours of practice and an intimate understanding of long-range shooting dynamics. Colonel Martinez disclosed that higher headquarters had classified the mysterious sniper as a friendly unknown. Rather than attempting to identify or contact him, command had issued orders to accept his assistance while maintaining operational security. The decision reflected both gratitude for his life-saving interventions and recognition that his independent status might be more valuable than official cooperation. 3 months after their rescue in Kalar village, Morrison's team received new intelligence about their mysterious benefactor. A captured Taliban commander had revealed that their forces had placed a substantial bounty on the American Ghost, who had been eliminating their fighters throughout the border region. The price on his head indicated both the effectiveness of his interventions and the frustration he caused among enemy leaders. Chen's continued analysis of regional communications intercepts revealed that the mysterious sniper had become something of a legend among both American and Taliban forces. Afghan villagers spoke in whispers about a phantom marksman who protected American soldiers while remaining invisible to his enemies. The stories had taken on mythical proportions that obscured whatever truth lay behind the man's identity and motivations. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. A retired Marine sniper named Jack Collins approached Morrison during a rotation back to the United States. Collins claimed to know the identity of the mysterious marksman but requested complete confidentiality before revealing any information. His story would forever change Morrison's understanding of what had happened in the Afghan mountains. Collins explained that the mysterious sniper was David McReynolds, a former Army Ranger who had lost his son in a Taliban bombing 3 years earlier. McReynolds had returned to Afghanistan as a private contractor, but had gone missing 6 months into his deployment. Rather than leaving the country, he had established himself in the mountains along the border and dedicated his life to protecting American soldiers from Taliban ambushes. McReynolds had been tracking Morrison's team for several days before the Kalar mission, having intercepted intelligence suggesting they were walking into a trap. His intimate knowledge of Taliban tactics, combined with exceptional shooting skills developed during multiple combat deployments, made him uniquely qualified to provide the precise support that had saved their lives. The revelation explained many of the mysteries surrounding their rescue. McReynolds' knowledge of American tactical procedures, his ability to anticipate enemy movements, and his dedication to protecting fellow soldiers had created the legend of the Ghost Sniper. He operated entirely alone, using equipment purchased with his own money and sustained by an unshakable commitment to honor his fallen son's memory. Collins revealed that McReynolds had been killed 2 weeks after the Kalar operation while attempting to rescue another trapped American unit. Taliban forces had finally located his mountain hideout and overwhelmed his position despite his deadly accurate shooting. He had died as he had lived during his final months, protecting American soldiers from an enemy that had taken everything he held dear. Morrison's team learned that McReynolds had been posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions in protecting American forces throughout his 6-month independent campaign. The citation would never be made public due to the classified nature of his operations, but his sacrifice would be remembered by the men whose lives he had saved. The knowledge that their mysterious benefactor had been a father seeking redemption through service gave new meaning to their survival. McReynolds had transformed his grief into a mission of protection that had saved dozens of American lives before his own death in the Afghan mountains. His legacy lived on in every soldier who had benefited from his selfless intervention. Morrison's team returned to active duty with a deeper appreciation for the bonds that connected all soldiers in combat. They had been saved by a man they never met, whose pain had driven him to extraordinary acts of courage and sacrifice. The ghost sniper of the Afghan mountains had given them a second chance at life, and they were determined to honor his memory through their continued service to their country and their fellow warriors.